Read, however, Liber 156, see the Equinox, also Book 4, Part 3, Appendix 7. It is a little difficult to justify the epithet unbeliever. It seems to me that, on the contrary, they are the believers. Skepticism is sword and shield to the wise man. But by skepticism, one does not mean the sneering infidelity of a bowling broke, or the gutter snipe agnosticism of a Harry Bolter, which are crude remedies against a very vulgar colic. The doctrine is further developed. The term deva agos is again obscure. The verse teaches that one should not be afraid to act. Action must be fought by reaction, and tyranny will never be overthrown by slavish submission to it. Cowardice is conquered by a course of exposing oneself unnecessarily to danger. The desire of the flesh has ever grown stronger for ascetics, as they endeavored to combat it by abstinence, and when, with old age, their functions are atrophied, they proclaim vaingloriously, "I have conquered." The way to conquer any desire is to understand it, and freedom consists in the ability to decide whether or no you will perform any given action. The adept should always be ready to abide by the toss of a coin, and remain absolutely indifferent as to whether it falls head or tail. By non-existing is meant the lower asat. The word is used on other occasions to mean an asat, which is higher than and beyond sat. Bodhi implies the root light in its highest sense of LVX. But even in Hindu theory, Panta Rai. This verse again refers to the process of selection and elimination already described. The aspiration must be considered as unaffected by this process, except in so far as it becomes brighter and clearer in consequence of it. The last sentence seems again to refer to this question of asceticism. The adept is not affected by his actions. This repeats the same lesson. The adept may plunge into the work of the world and undertake his daily duties and pleasures exactly as another man would do, but he is not moved by them as the other man is. And for 28 and 29, no comment. Again, the ascetic life is forbidden. It is moreover shown to be a delusion that the ascetic life assists liberation. The ascetic thinks that by reducing himself to the condition of a vegetable, he's advanced upon the path of evolution. It is not so. Minerals have no inherent power of motion, save intramolecularly. Intramolecularly, plants grow and move, though but little. Animals are free to move in every direction, and space itself is no hindrance to the higher principles of man. Advance is in the direction of more continuous and more untiring energy. Reference is here made to the attainment of the Buddha. It was only after he had abandoned the ascetic life that he attained. So far from manifesting that attainment by non-action, he created a revolution in India by attacking the caste system, and by preaching his law, created a karma so violent that even today its primary force is still active. The present Buddha, the Master Therion, is doing a similar but even greater work by his proclamation, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." This continues the diatribe against non-action and points out that the ascetic is entirely deluded when he supposes that doing nothing has no effect. To refuse to save life is murder. Continues the subject. The basis of knowledge is experience. The candidate is exhorted to patience and one-pointedness, and further to an indifference to the result, which comes of true confidence that the result will follow. For example, Liber 221:44. For pure will, unassuaged purpose delivered from the lust of result, is every way perfect. Compare Levi's aphorism. The magician should work as though he had omnipotence at his command and eternity at his disposal. Do not imagine that it matters whether you finish the task in this life or not. Go on quietly and steadily, unmoved by anything whatever. Accept the laws of nature and work with them. Do not be always trying to take shortcuts. Do not complain and do not be afraid of the length of the Buddha. This treatise being for beginners, reward is offered, and it is really worthwhile. One may find oneself in the office of the Buddha. Yea, cried the Holy One, and from thy spark will I, the Lord, kindle a great light. I will burn through the great city. In the old and desolate land, I will cleanse it from its great impurity. And thou, O prophet, shalt see these things, and thou shalt heed them not. Now is the pillar established in the void. Now is Asi fulfilled of Asar. Now is Hur let down into the animal soul of things, like a fiery star that falleth upon the darkness of the earth. Through the midnight thou art dropped, my child, my conqueror, my sword-girt captain, O Hur, and they shall find thee as a black, gnarled, glittering stone. And they shall worship thee. Now the discourse turns to the question of the origin of evil. The alchemical theory is here set forth. The first matter of the work is not so worthy as the elixir, and I must pass through the state of the black dragon to attain thereto. The Nirmanakaya body is the body of light, as described in Book 4, Part 3, but it is to be considered as having been developed to the highest point possible that is compatible with incarnation. The Sambhogakaya has 3 perfections added, so-called. These would prevent incarnation. The Dharmakaya body is what may be described as the final sublimation of an individual. It is a bodiless flame on the point of mingling with the infinite flame. A description of the state of one who is in this body is given in the Hermit of Asopus Island. Such a rough account of these robes, according to Blavatsky. She further adds that the Dharmakaya body has to be renounced by anyone who wants to help humanity. Now, helping humanity is a very nice thing for those who like it, and no doubt those who do so deserve well of their fellows, but there is no reason whatever for imagining that to help humanity is the only kind of work worth doing in this universe. The feeling of desire to do so is a limitation and a drag just as bad as any other. It is not at all necessary to make all this fuss about the initiator and all the rest of it. The universe is exceedingly elastic, especially for those who are themselves elastic. Therefore, of course, one cannot remember humanity when one is wearing the Dharmakaya body. One can hang the Dharmakaya body in one's magical wardrobe, with a few camphor balls to keep the moths out, and put it on from time to time when feeling in need of refreshment. In fact, one who is helping humanity is constantly in need of a wash and brush up from time to time. There is nothing quite so contaminating as humanity, especially theosophists, as Madame Blavatsky herself discovered. But the best of all illustrations is death, in which all things unessential to progress are burned up. The plan is much better than that of the elixir of life. It is perfectly all right to use this elixir for energy and youth. But despite all, impressions keep on cluttering up the mind, and once in a while it is certainly a splendid thing for everybody to have the spring cleaning of death. With regard to one's purpose in doing anything at all, it depends on the nature of one's star. Blavatsky was horribly hampered by the trance of sorrow. She could see nothing else in the world but helping humanity. She takes no notice whatever of the question of progress through other planets. Geocentricity is a very pathetic and amusingly childish characteristic of the older schools. They are always talking about the 10,000 worlds, but it is only a figure of speech. They do not believe in them as actual realities. It is one of the regular Oriental tricks to exaggerate all sorts of things in order to impress other people with one's knowledge, and then to forget altogether to all this particular piece of information onto the wheel of the law. Consequently, Blavatsky's talk about the sublimity of the Nirmanakaya body is no more than the speech of a politician who is thanking a famous general for having done some of his dirty work for him. The sum of misery is diminished only in a minute degree by the attainment of the Pratyeka Buddha. The tremendous energy acquired is used to accomplish the miracle of destruction. If the keystone of an ark is taken away, the other stones are not promoted to a higher place, they fall. Nirvana of destruction. Nirvana means cessation. What messy English. The words selfish bliss must not be taken in a literal sense. It is exceedingly difficult to discuss this question. The Occidental mind finds it difficult even to attach any meaning to the conditions of nirvana. Partly it is the fault of language, partly it is due to the fact that the condition of Arhan is quite beyond thought. He is beyond the abyss, and there is a thing is only true insofar as it is self-contradictory. The Arhan has no self to be blissful. It is simpler to consider it on the lines given in my commentary to the last verse, and verse 41. Skip a comment for this here. All this about Gautama Buddha having renounced nirvana is apparently all a pure invention of Madame Blavatsky, and has no authority in the Buddhist canon. The Buddha is referred to again and again as having passed away by that kind of passing away which leaves nothing whatever behind. The account of his doing this was given in the Parinibbana Sutta, and it was the contention of the Theosophists that this great, sublime Nibbana story was something peculiar to Gautama Buddha. They began to talk about Parinibbana, Supernibbana, as if there were some way of subtracting one from one, which would leave a higher, superior kind of nothing, or as if there were some way of blowing out a candle which would leave Moses in a much more Egyptian darkness than we ever supposed when we were children. This is not science. This is not business. This is American Sunday journalism. The Hindu and the American are very much alike in this innocence, this naivety, which demands fairy stories with ever bigger giants. They cannot bear the idea of anything being complete and done with, so they are always talking in superlatives, and are hard put to it when the facts catch up with them, and they have to invent new superlatives. Instead of saying that there are bricks of various size and specifying those size, they have a brick and a super brick, and one brick and some brick, and when they've got the end, they chase through this dictionary for some epithet to brick, which shall excite the sense of wonder at the magnificent progress and super progress. I present the American nation with this word, which is supposed to have been made. Probably the whole thing is a bluff without a single fact behind it. Almost the whole of the Hindu psychology is an example of this kind of journalism. They are not content with the supreme God. The other man wishes to show off by having a supreme God than that. When a third man comes along and finds them disputing, it is up to him to invent a supremist super God. And, that's hard when I hear says, well, no. That's the whole thing. If you go back, to even the earlier generations have said about this path or that path, a lot of these limitations on God, even within certain paths like Judaism, come later. So it's actually the opposite, that people, they limit the path as it goes on, and maybe then another has to come and teach it. Another avatar, sent one, prophet, whatever you want to call him, bridge builder. It is simply ridiculous to try to add to the definition of Nibbana by this invention of Parinibbana, and only talkers busy themselves with these fantastic speculations. The serious student minds his own business, which is the business at hand. The president of a corporation does not pay his bookkeeper to make a statement of the countless billions of profit to be made in some future year. It requires no great ability to string a row of zeros after a significant figure until the ink runs out. What is wanted is the actual balance of the week. The reader is most strongly urged not to permit himself to indulge in fantastic flights of thought, which are the poison of the mind, because they represent an attempt to run away from reality, a dispersion of energy, and a corruption of moral strength. His business is, firstly, to know himself, secondly, to order and control himself, thirdly, to develop himself on sound organic lines little by little. The rest is only leather and prunella. There is, however, a sense in which the service of humanity is necessary to the completeness of the adept. He is not to fly away too far. Some remarks on this course are given in the note to the next verse. The student is also advised to take note of the conditions of the membership of the A. And my placement on the card is now just trying to, the 3-dot thing. This is a statement of the conditions of performing the alchemical operation indicated in the injunction coagula insolve. The adept aspires upward. He casts off everything that he is, but after reaching the supreme triad, he aspires downward. He keeps on adding to all that he has or is, but after another manner. Part of our treatise is loathsomely sentimental twaddle, what America, God bless her, calls snob stuff, when tipsy old ladies become maudlin. It is time to go. Behold what is written for a parable in the great law. And so this is Liber 65, chapter 5, 51 to 56. Let not the failure and the pain turn aside the worshippers. The foundations of the pyramid were hewn in the living rock ere sunset. Did the king weep at dawn that the crown of the pyramid was yet unquarried in the distant land? There was also an hummingbird that spake unto the horn Carastus, and prayed him for poison. And the great snake of Chem, the holy one, the royal Ras serpent, answered him and said, I sailed over the sky of Nu in the car called Millions of Years, and I saw not any creature upon said that was equal to me. The venom of my fang is the inheritance of my father, and of my father's father, and how shall I give it unto thee? Live thou and thy children, as I and my fathers have lived, even unto 100 millions of generations, and it may be that the mercy of the mighty ones may bestow upon thy children a drop of the poison of eld. Then the hummingbird was afflicted in his spirit, and he flew into the flowers. And it was as if naught had been spoken between them. Yet in a little while a serpent struck him that he died. But an ibis that meditated upon the bank of the Nile, the beautiful god listened and heard, and he laid aside his ibis ways, and became as a serpent, saying, peradventure, in 100 millions of generations of my children, they shall attain to a drop of the poison of the fang of the exalted one. And behold, ere the moon waxed thrice, became an Ras serpent, and the poison of the fang was established in him. Now, we don't see for 45 and 46 a comment. These verses confirm what was said. Well, okay. 3 verses commented on with one line, 45, 46, and 47. These verses confirm what was said above with regard to perseverance. Every cause has its effect. There is no waste. There is no evasion. This is again obscure, as the word self means so many things, and though many kinds of type have been employed to spell it, clear definitions of what each type indicates are lacking. It is here, however, the doctrine of the 2 paths which is taught. On reaching the highest grade of the second order, that of exempt adept, there are 2 paths open, the right hand and the left. These are described at length in Liber 418, and we must refer to the student to that book. But the main point is that on the right-hand path, stripping self, the adept becomes Nemo, the master of the temple, and returns across the abyss, or rather is flung forth, and appears in the heaven of Jupiter, or sphere of another planet, as a morning star or an evening star, to bring light to them that dwell upon the earth. On the left-hand path, the adept, wishing to keep all that he has, shuts himself up in a tower of silence, there to suffer the progressively degrading agony of slow dispersion. For on the right-hand path, the master of the temple is momentarily, after a fashion, at rest. His intellectual and physical forces are acting in the world, but his blood is in the cup of Babylon, a draught to awaken the Eid of the Allfather, of the eld of the Allfather, and that all remains of him is a little pile of dust, which only waits the moment when it shall be burnt to ashes. A further warning against the doctrine of inaction. It is extraordinary how the author insists again and against on this point. Orthodox Buddhism ostensibly teaches that creation of any karma, whatever, merely perpetuates sorrow. This verse repeats the lesson yet once more. It is another way of saying, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. This again states the same thing, urges the aspirant to live his life fully on every plane, preserving as is true an indifference to all that he does, but only the inner indifference of contempt, not the outer indifference of atrophy. Madame Blavatsky herself smoked like a volcano, drank like a fish, swore like a trooper, loved like a Cleopatra. She was right. Read the Taoist instructions to this effect. There are a great many people who are not only without marked capacity, but are obviously without any capacity at all for the attainment, even on a very modest scale. The question then arises as to whether they can be any good unless they are made to do something. They are likely to slip back rather than to make progress. Fortunately, there is a way through which they can make sure of acquiring the capacity in their next incarnation. This way is karma yoga, devotion through work to the work. The principal method of karma indicated is the preaching of the good law. Of course, it will be understood that anyone thus unfortunately situated cannot understand the law, but the law of such virtue is that this is not a fatal disadvantage. See Liber 300. The astronomy of the author of this book is not equal to her poetic prose. Mercury can hardly be said to have a fiery aura, or to be a silent watcher in the night, nor is it easy to attach any meaning to the statement that Mars and Mercury were once suns. The theories of transmigration of personality involved are a little difficult. This charge is very important to all students of whatever grade. Everyone's first duty is to himself and to his progress in the path, but his second duty, which presses the first hand, is to give assistance to those not so advanced. It seems rather a bold assertion that Sratpati is so easily attained, and I know of no canonical Buddhist authority for this statement. A Sratpati becomes an Arahat in 7 more incarnations. Siddhis, magical powers. You know, that's what they are. The promise in this verse is less difficult to believe. By true devotion is meant a devotion which does not depend upon its object. The highest kind of love acts for no return. It is, however, misleading to say that the Deva sight, light being, and the Deva hearing, Deva as an unfallen angel, that sort of thing, are not obtained in one short birth, as that it appears to mean that unless you are born with them, you can never acquire them, which is certainly untrue. It is open to anyone to say to anyone who has acquired them that he must have acquired them in a previous existence, but a more stupid argument can hardly be imagined. It is an ex cathedra statement, and it begs the question, and it contains the same fallacy as is committed by those who suppose that an uncreated God can explain an uncreated universe. By humility is meant the humility of the scientific man. This is merely a paraphrase of Sir Isaac Newton's remark about the child picking up shells. This verse has many possible interpretations, but its main meaning is that you should accept the universe without being affected by it. Divine refers to Tiphareth. Eternal refers to Kether. In these 2 verses, the path is explained in language almost Kabbalistic. By desire is again meant tendency in the technical Buddhist sense. The law of gravitation is the most universal example of such a tendency. This verse refers to a stage in which the master has got entirely beyond the law of cause and effect. The words self-divine are somewhat misleading in view of the sense in which they have been used previously. The student is told to guard the lower, that is to say, he should protect and strengthen it in every possible way, never allowing it to grow disproportionately or to overstep its boundaries. In this verse we find the self identified with the universe. The ego, i.e., that which is opposed by the non-ego, has to be destroyed. This verse appears to employ a local metaphor, and as Madame Blavatsky had never visited Tibet, the metaphor is obscure and the geography doubtful. we find the talented author again in difficulties, this time with botany. By the boundless vision is not meant the stupid siddhi, but one of the forms of samadhi, perhaps that upon the snake. Ananta, the great green snake that bounds the universe. It is most important that the master should not reject any pupil, as it is written in Liber Legis. He must teach, but he may make severe the ordeals. Compare also the 13th author in Liber 418, where it is shown that Nemo has no means of deciding which of his flowers is the really important one, although assured that all will one day bloom. The words mortal coil suggests Stratford on Avon rather than Lhasa. The meaning of the verse is a little obscure. It is that the conqueror will be recognized as a Buddha sooner or later. This is not true, but does not matter. My God, if one wanted recognition from man, help. Yeah, get your honor for God. I should have thought before reading that, but because I know that's not really what's meant there. Further encouragement to proceed, for although you do not attain everything, yet the enemies you have conquered will not again attack you. In point of fact, this is hardly true. The conquest must be very complete for it to be so, but they certainly recur with very diminished intensity. Similar is the gradual immunization of man to syphilis, which was a rapidly fatal disease when fresh. Now all have it in our blood, and we are protected to some extent, at least, against the ladies. This verse is again very obscure from overloading. The fruit and the prize both refer to nirvana. This verse must not be interpreted as offering the inducement of the title of thrice honored to a bodhisattva. It is a mere eloquent appeal to the candidate. This about woe is awful. It suggests a landlady in Dickens who has seen better days. The 4 and 7 portals refer to the first 4 stages ending in Arhat, the second to the portals referred to in the 3rd fragment.